Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing 2020's Vampires vs. the Bronx. I'm very excited about this movie ever since I saw the trailer about 2 days ago. I'm excited. Let's get into it. Okay, so the Netflix original 2020 Vampires vs. the Bronx. Just finished watching it. I kind of enjoyed it. It wasn't bad. It's an 80s style. Whole film style is 80s themed. It reminded me very much of, and yes, I saw a lot of comments, Attack the Block, which Bronx style or more Americanized because that was a British movie. But I actually saw more Lost Boys in it. I noticed that no one really brought up Lost Boys, but it is Lost Boys, New Age, set in the Bronx. That's all it is. It's also a mix of Stranger Things, which everyone just looking at the title knew, but it's a bit more, it's like they knew that they were doing that. They make a lot of jokes to it that that's what they're stealing it from. But then again, Stranger Things is just stealing it from other 80s movies and bringing it to 2020, or I guess they started in like 2018, whatever. Mostly the storyline is based around these three kids. And guess what? You have the same characters you would have in all of the things I just brought up. You got the nerd, you got the badass, you got the wannabe hero, or the passionate one, whichever one you want to label him as. He's always the main character of the group, even though he's not supposed to be just the main character, but he's the one that's focused the most on pushing the story forward. In that aspect, they're young actors. They're like 17, and they did a great job. But there was so many things that I found didn't really stick and was cheesy. Like I couldn't figure out the demographic at some point, because some stuff was like, wow, that's kind of much for a younger, like a young teen. But then there's also parts where it's like, who are you trying to pull in here? Because it's like, 35-year-old's not going to watch this film and be like, oh, it was great, I loved it. Like so much of the humor kind of bounces back and forth between, like I couldn't find the demographic in it. I couldn't, for new age movies anyways, like I kind of get back in the 80s, people let anyone watch anything. Like parents wouldn't care. In this one, it was kind of like there'd be some cheesy humor where I'm like, oh yeah, like this is for a young kid. But then all of a sudden there was some like gangster, you know, guns, selling drugs, father shot on the street situations. And I'm like, this is hardcore and like the bottom of it. So I was very back and forth on who it was for. Don't get me wrong, I like movies like this, especially 80s style, so it had me, like, right away. I watched that trailer literally a couple days ago and went, I'm gonna go review that movie. That movie looks like something I'd be into. Okay, let's get more into the plot here. So, as I said, there are three main characters, the nerd, the badass, and the emotional one who really pushes the story forward. Now, in this movie, the main plot, obviously, is that vampires are trying to take over the Bronx. How we get there is pretty clever. I liked it, where the main character of the three is trying to save the Bronx and save one of the other characters, which is, you know, an uncle, I guess. Like, he's not a real uncle, but like that's the character role he really portrays, you know. After school, when their parents are working or mom's, you know, got the late shift, they'd go over to his convenience store and they'd hang out there and he would keep them out of trouble. It's a good concept. I like it. He was a really lovable character. And then they bring up a lot of foreshadowing with him and like tools through it. So I really enjoyed his character, and I think they needed someone like him because like right from the get-go you're like, oh, I really like this character. Like he's a happy-go-lucky, you know, just here for everyone kind of guy. So I liked that. But in the plot, that's who they're trying to save because the rent went up because people are buying all the properties around him. They don't say that, but like that's obviously why his rent went up. Otherwise, it's just a crappy landlord. And then so they decide to do the block party. No one believes it's going to happen. No one believes it's going to work out. Vampires, going to go back to what I said earlier. Lost Boys, copy. Complete Lost Boys, mess up the face, give some fangs. They went full classic, holy water, crosses, the whole 9 yards. Everything that was in the classic, like, what will Dracula hate, is the style of vampire they went here, which I like. I feel like we need more of that. Go back to the classic ways. Like, all of a sudden it's like, well, silver can hurt them too, and this hurts them, and it's just like, nah, man. Just like, this is what everyone knows hurts them. So they went with that. They kept it straight to the books. Classic vampire. I respect that. I respect that. Okay, so let's actually get into pros, cons, what I did and didn't like. So there was a lot of jokes that just didn't land for me. They were either off-putting or they just weren't in the right spot. And they were trying to make certain things funny, and with goof movies like this, 80s style, like it's supposed to be off. Like the whole point of these movies is it's supposed to be like a bit different, a bit weird. But to me, it's almost like they went the opposite direction, going that direction, if that makes any sense. Where it's like they wanted to be one of those movies so bad that it became the most mainstream part of that movie, of that kind of movie. You know, like it's like I wanted to be an action movie so bad, but be completely different than everything else, that I became every action movie. This is not an action movie, but that's my example, I guess. So everything was kind of off-putting, like it just didn't line up with what it was going for. And then it was a long movie. It's like an hour-and-a-half movie, and there's a lot of scenes where it's just like, did we get anything from that? Like, not even foreshadows, which I love foreshadows. Didn't need too many for this movie. There weren't a whole lot anyways. A lot of what happened just kind of spur the moment, whatever, this is what we're going with, which worked in a couple scenes, but in other scenes it's just like, well, I guess we'll just write that off. You know, just give it to one of the writers. No. Give it to one of the new writers. Let's see what he can do. And he just went, I don't know, hit them in the head with something. Okay, like that's where it went with that. No offense, like these guys are working really hard. The movie was okay, but there are just parts where it's like, all right, why didn't you just cut this movie like a bit shorter then and have some better action or some better moves instead of the write-off that they did? And even some of the character building was off. Like every 80s, there always has to be the love interest, and there is one, but there is no connection between them at all. Like why or how that she even becomes interested with him. Like at one point they're like, oh yeah, there's vampires, and she's the only one who believes them, but it's a very brief, like, they probably should have put more character building or connections in this movie instead of it just being like, well, I believed in vampires too, so you and me, like, we're not a couple or anything, but obviously I am interested in you now. It didn't work. It really wasn't. The character building in that aspect didn't hold up. That being said, I did enjoy a couple of the characters, and there's a couple characters I didn't enjoy. I really enjoyed the uncle, or the guy that plays, or like works at the convenience store, who plays that kind of fatherly role, because there just isn't any other fatherly role, and I really like that. They end up watching Blade, and it reminded me of me and my dad watching Blade, where like we're just sitting down, we're like, oh, that's sick, like, oh, look what he just did. Loved it. Fully connected there. That was it. But then there's other characters, like the nerdy character, and it's just like, all right, you had to have him. You had to have someone who had all the knowledge about vampires, could write everything down and be like, no, this is true and this is false. And then let's watch Blade to learn about vampires, which, yet again, I actually really enjoyed. But it's just, I didn't like how they played off his role. He had left and then come back, and then he comes back and he just knows everything about vampires, and it's just, but they don't really, I don't know, they don't really get into why he'd know all that, other than the fact that he was reading like Salem's Lot or something, and it's just like, you're the pro, and it's just like, you're just saying he's the nerd that happens to know everything about this for no apparent reason. And I just feel like his character didn't land at all. Like, at all. Like, there's a point where he like kind of tries to play a badass, like, oh, take that, and it just bombs for me. I was like, oh. I have to say, and spoiler, like, it might be a spoiler if this is something you'd care about if I bring up a character that I don't believe was in any of the trailers. But when Method Man came out as the priest, I was like, that's awesome. That's awesome. That had me. right then and there, I was already laughing. I was like, that is awesome. All I could think about is his throwbacks when he was a nun in How High, and I was like, that's great. Thank you. That made a lot of the movie for me, because no character building in a lot of the vampires. None so whatever, really. It's very last end. A lot of the movie was jumping around just knowing that they were scary and that you should watch out because there's vampires in the Bronx. Fair enough. Oh, and watch out for the gangbangers, which was apparently a very big deal as well, but very mildly mentioned, other than a dude driving up in a Civic with a bunch of other guys being like, hey, what's up? So yeah, that's pretty much how that movie went, and it was okay. Yeah, it was an alright movie. It was a bit long, as I was saying earlier. Probably could have killed some time, but it tried to be an 80s movie, and well, that's it. It tried to be an 80s movie. I give this movie a 7 out of 10, and yes, I change my rating every time, but it's going to be a 7 out of 10 for me, because it wasn't terrible. It was an okay movie. It was, you know, it had some decent acting for younger roles, and it had some lovable characters, even with some hate. There were some characters I didn't like, but yeah, it was an okay movie. And if you like spooky horror style movies, which it wasn't scary at all, like I don't think it was going for that at all. It was just generally trying to be a Halloween 80s, you know, throwback. And if you're into something like that, definitely check it out. If you were looking for something scary, not for you. If you're looking for something a bit more actually spooky, and when I say spooky, I mean like haunted house, like they're walking around and it's dark and it's grim and you kind of get yourself in that zone. Still not really it for you, but if you're looking for something 80s throwback and just want to toss it on, Hey guys, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, please hit that like button. If you want to see more, hit the old subscribe button. Drop some comments. Let's talk about the reviews. This is Let's Review Some Shit. I hope you enjoyed.